In this video, you'll learn to simulate an HDR style look using a single exposure. This isn't a true HDR image, but it gives a close approximation of it. This technique can be useful when you didn't have the foresight to shoot multiple exposures, but you're working with a single picture. So for example, let's say that you only shot this particular image. It has some detail in the highlights and some in the shadows. Double-click the thumbnail in Bridge to develop it in Camera Raw. Click the Auto button on the Basic tab, and you'll see that exposure, contrast, and highlights are all dialed down in an effort to reclaim some of the detail from the brightest areas of the image, and we can see a bit more detail in the fencing here. But most of the grass is just white. This is the best we can do from this single image, however. So let's click Open Image, and this will be the point from which we begin our HDR simulation. Go up to the Image menu and choose Adjustments, HDR Toning, and this particular adjustment can only be performed on a flattened image with no layers. If your document has layers, you'll be prompted if you want to flatten the document. We're not prompted here because we just have a single background layer. Now here in the HDR toning dialog box, we have a list of methods, and these are the same methods that are available in the Merge to HDR Pro dialog box. Try exposure and gamma. If you change the exposure here, you're not actually displaying new information on the screen, you're simply darkening the image. And that's because we're starting with a single 8-bit image here. It's not really an HDR image. So we're going to be getting better results if we choose Local Adaptation. And then choose one of the presets from this list. Let's try Photorealistic. And then change the radius. Make it much bigger and much smaller. And I think in this image I like the radius larger. It gives more detail to the branches of the trees. We'll increase the exposure a bit to brighten up the pond. And then click OK. So we have an HDR look even though we started with a single exposure. In a true HDR image, we'd see much more detail in the highlights. As it stands, we have a large flat area of white pixels. But this is the best we can do with a single image. And so this technique is useful in many situations where you didn't have the foresight to bracket your shot and create multiple exposures with different brightness levels.